Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Before Coffee. We're here at the Binnenhof, which is the center of government in The Hague for the Netherlands. And we are currently getting ready to find out what's happening. I'm going to cover some Dutch news as well as some general European news today on Before Coffee. Abused children are often also violent towards their parents.
In other news, there's Lee and there's Margot, but we're only making plans for Nigel.
In European news, ex-deacon accused of disguising men as missionaries to avoid conscription in Ukraine.
Also, we spin the squeal of fortune to see who's going to try to get out of jail by turning in their boss.
And in a culture news, big sexual assault allegations coming out of the UK for Russell Brand.
Those headlines and more on today, which is National Cheeseburger Day, September 18th, 2023 edition of Before Coffee in The Hague.
Abused children are often also violent towards their parents. Children who experience child abuse are often violent towards their parents, according to a study by Verwey Jonker Institute. 2 in 3 abused people say they were violent against their father or mother. The Verwey Jonker Institute has been following families struggling with domestic violence since 2009. The research already showed that such abuse and neglect is more harmful to children than thought, and that violence continues in more than half of the cases even after report to Veilig Thuis, which is veilig is like safety or safe, and Thuis is house, so safe home, basically. This time the Institute has looked at parental abuse by their children. This mainly happens psychologically, i.e. children scold, harass, belittle, or even threaten their parents. The children do not want to show the same behavior as their parents, but they have no choice, says scientific director of Verwey Jonker, Marion Steketty. They just never learned any other way to deal with arguments and conflicts. They have actually learned that you have to behave violently. These children do not know that you can also solve problems by talking and listening. According to her, this also means that there is a high chance that these young people will use violence in their love relationships or become victims of it. Steketty calls it worrying that such a large proportion of abused children also use violence themselves. She believes that care services should pay more attention to children precisely because they are their parents and parents of the future. We have known for a long time that violence is passed on from generation to generation, says Steketty, but these figures are much higher than expected. This requires a different, more targeted approach to teach these children to deal with conflicts differently. If we want to break the cycle, we really have to provide good help to today's children. So there's your short little article there, coming out on Monday at 11:17 on NOS News. The big coverage of, hey, don't abuse your children, otherwise they'll abuse their children, and those children abuse their children, and then everyone's going to be abused, and that's not fun, so don't do it.
The cycle of violence.
Cycle of violence.
You hear that? Yep. It's time for hurricane news, folks. And that in the background is the famous 1980s hit by XTC. We're only making plans for Nigel. And we go to our story from the Orlando Times, which has the latest hurricane updates. Orlando Sentinel, sorry. Orlando Times is a rag. No, just kidding. And our reporter's name is Richard Tribu. And headline, Hurricane Center ends Lee, Margot advisories, and keeps eyes on Tropical Storm Nigel, plus one other system. Post-tropical cyclone winds died down Sunday as it moved farther east over Atlantic Canada, headed for Newfoundland and back into the Atlantic. As of 11 p.m., the NHC gave its final advisory, National Hurricane Center, I had to think about what that was, on what had been Hurricane Lee as well as Tropical Storm Margot in the Atlantic, but is continuing to track newly formed Tropical Storm Nigel as well as giving increased odds for a new system to form in the tropical Atlantic later this week. The final advisory on Lee said it was located about 135 miles northwest of Port aux Basques, Newfoundland, heading northeast at 22 miles per hour with a maximum sustained winds of 45 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds extend up to 290 miles. All tropical storm warnings were removed. A faster northeastward to east-northeastward motion is expected over the next couple of days, taking Lee over Newfoundland later and over the Atlantic waters by early Monday, which is today. Forecasters said continued gradual weakening is forecast during the next couple of days, and Lee could dissipate on Tuesday. The system lashed New England, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia as it transformed from Hurricane Lee into a post-tropical system with a widening wind field on Saturday. A 51-year-old motorist in Seaport, Maine, died Saturday after a large limb fell on his vehicle on US Highway 1 during the high winds. The limb brought down live power lines, and utility workers had to cut power before removing the man, who died later at the hospital. The post-tropical cyclone was strong enough to cause power outages several hundred miles from its center. On midday Saturday, 11% of electricity customers in Maine lacked power, along with 27% in Nova Scotia, 8% on New Brunswick, and 3% on Prince Edward Island. Those are known as the Maritimes for you people who aren't familiar. The post-tropical cyclone was strong enough to cause, let's go down some more. The NHC had also been tracking 2 tropical storms, plus Tropical Storm Margot became post-tropical cyclone Margot by Sunday morning, while Tropical Storm Nigel formed late Saturday to become the season's 14th named storm and is projected to grow into the season's 6th hurricane. As of 5 p.m., Nigel Center is located about 1,050 miles southeast of Bermuda, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour with a maximum sustained winds of 65. The tropical storm force winds extend out 140 miles. The general motion is forecast to continue for the next couple of days. Nigel is then forecast to turn northward by late Tuesday and accelerate northeastward after that. Nigel will become a hurricane tonight and is forecast to approach major hurricane intensity in a couple of days. If it reaches Category 3 strength, it will become the 4th major hurricane of the year after Hurricanes Franklin, Idalia, and Lee. And let's not forget the one that hit the Pacific, which was... I've already forgotten. Yeah, so I'll think of it in a minute. Nigel became the 10th named storm to form in the Atlantic since August 20th. The season has burned through Emily, Franklin, Gert, Harold, Idalia, Jose, Katia, Lee, Margot, and now Nigel in 4 weeks. What could become the 15th named storm could form a tropical wave forecast to move up the west coast of Africa by Wednesday. The next name for the 2023 Atlantic hurricane list is Ophelia. So there's your story, your updates on the hurricanes as we make plans for Nigel and wait for Ophelia to jump out a window, because that's what she did in Hamlet. Did she jump out a window? She drowned herself. I thought she drowned by jumping out of a window. I don't think she jumped into it. I misinterpreted. Okay. And that's our story. Back to you.
Coming out of Ukraine, investigators say at least 6 individuals escaped to the EU countries after a deacon allegedly took some bribes. I mean, money will get you anywhere. This is from Lorenzo Tondo and Sean Walker in Kyiv. A former deacon in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa has been detained on allegations that he took bribes to help men evade conscription by disguising them as church missionaries so they could leave the country. The Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, said last week that the former deacon belonged to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, one of the 2 main branches of Orthodoxy in the country until recently linked to the Moscow Patriarchy. Investigators say the former deacon, who has not been named, successfully facilitated the escape of at least 6 individuals to several EU countries. The suspect had a compiled list of missionaries who were intended to travel abroad on behalf of the diocese leader and the religious community with the aim of becoming priests. The SBU's diocese. Yeah, I was like, I know I'm saying that wrong. Diocese. The deacon allegedly pocketed about $1,500 in bribes to certify that the departure of the men from the country was necessary for the diocese's work in Europe. The SBU has seized the former deacon's computers, mobile phones, SIM cards, and a sum of US dollars in cash. Wow, he kept that stuff all together, huh? If convicted, he could face up to 9 years in prison. It is the latest in a series of corruption scandals over draft evasion in Ukraine. Last month, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fired every regional recruitment head in the country, citing endemic corruption in the apparatus. I love that when they say that. Endemic corruption in the apparatus. It sounds like a really cool sci-fi film. In further development last week, the Prosecutor General's office in Odessa revealed that the leadership of the regional police force had been assisting dozens of men in evading conscription. As a result, the head of the Military Medical Commission and 2 secretaries are under investigation for allegedly falsifying dozens of medical certificates to demonstrate the individual's unfitness for military service. Each certificate reportedly cost between $7,000 to $10,000. During the first months of the war, hair in my mouth, as hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians signed up for volunteer battalions to help the army in other ways, there was no great need to enforce mobilization rules. 18 months into the war, with tens of thousands of casualties and many troops at the front weary and in need of rotation, the army has increasingly turned to mobilization, often handing out call-up papers on the street. Male Ukrainian nationals of conscription age are allowed to cross the border only if they are financially supporting 3 or more children under the age of 18, are single fathers of children under the 18, or have children or guardians of children with disabilities. In many cities, Telegram channels often offer people keen to avoid draft information on where conscription officers have been spotted that day. Several videos have gone viral of officers bundling men into vans. Many business owners report men unwilling to come to work, scared they could be conscripted if they leave the house. For those with money, there have always been plenty of opportunities to buy their way out of mobilization, usually by purchasing a doctored medical certificate that provides an exemption from military service and allows them to leave the country. The price has ranged from a few $100s at the beginning of the war to about $5,000 in Odessa, several people have been told at The Guardian. So, more news coming out. The war's still going. I guess they thought it would end soon so they wouldn't get conscripted, but it's happening and they're trying to get out of it. But I mean, it sucks because you didn't ask to be born in Ukraine, but also you did live there until you're 18, so I guess you could have, if you really wanted to avoid conscription, you should have left the country as soon as you're an adult, I guess.
Maybe become a real doctor.
Yeah, become a doctor. Yeah, exactly.
We spin the squeal of fortune, whenever it comes up here. Yes, every day or every chance we get, we try to spin the wheel to see all of Donald Trump's co-defendants and who's going to be squealing next. And so today we're going to spin the wheel again. Here we go. Is that on screen? It just stopped. And it stopped at Scott Hall. So we're going to look up that poor unfortunate guy right now. Scott Hall was actually the first Trump defendant to turn himself in. So this is from CNN Politics from August 22nd, 2023. And the writer is Zachary Cohen. The first of former President Trump's 18 co-defendants in the Georgia election case turned himself in at a Fulton County jail on Tuesday. That would have been Tuesday, like the 21st, I believe. A process that will be early signal of how other surrenders are handled. Scott Hall, who works for the bail bondsman in Atlanta, was charged by Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis with crimes related to his alleged involvement in the Coffee County, Georgia voting systems breach. His experience will likely demonstrate how most defendants' cases are treated. The Fulton County grand jury indictment accuses Hall of conspiring to unlawfully access voter data and ballot counting machines at the Coffee County election offices on January 7th, 2021. Hall is facing 7 charges, including the racketeering count that's central to Willis's prosecution, as well as several charges stemming from the Coffee County allegations. He spent hours inside the restricted area of the Coffee County election office when voting systems were breached in January 2021. The breach was connected to the efforts by pro-Trump conspiracy theorists to find voter fraud. Hall was captured on surveillance video at the office the day of the breach. He testified before the grand jury of Fulton County case and acknowledged that he gained access to the voting machines. So there's your guy on the inside, Scott Hall, who God knows what he was up to, but I think he's potentially a squealer. That's what I would say. And that's it for the Squeal of Fortune today. On to your story.
All right, let's cover our big culture news of the weekend. Russell Brand, famous sex addict, happens to be a sexual assaulter. Who would have thought? That's just my opinion here. Yeah. But this is interesting because even politicians are urging women to speak to officers on claims of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse by Brand. This is from Kevin Rawlinson on The Guardian. Police should be called in to investigate rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse allegations against Russell Brand, senior politicians have said. Both the chair of the Commons Women and Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, and the Pensions Minister, Laura Todt, on Monday expressed their hope that women would have described their painful experience with Brand and would come forward and speak to officers. Noakes said men accused of such crimes were able to get away with them too often and for too long. Yeah, I mean, he's been famously a sex addict for 20 years now, so... I mean, he stopped being a sex addict, but that's what he was known for a long time. And just, yeah. Noakes said men accused of such crimes are often able to get away with them too often and for too long. While she acknowledged it would be difficult for victims who said she had been shamed for speaking out since the reports emerged, she said she hoped that they would come forward and speak to the police. Noakes told BBC Radio 4's Today program, "These allegations are incredibly shocking and criminal. I would very much hope that complaints would be made both to the Metropolitan Police and indeed in the states, because this merits and needs a criminal investigation. Because for too long we have seen men, and the perpetrators of these sort of crimes are often invariably men, not being held account for their behaviors and their actions. Unfortunately, it seems that the celebrity, for whatever reason, can act as a shield for individuals who choose to conduct themselves in such a way. To be quite frank, if they were to happen in any business organization, you'd like to think that they'd be out the door." Asked whether it was a matter of her committee, the senior Tory MP said, "First and foremost, I think it's a matter for the police." Trott told LBC Radio, "I think everybody needs to do better. I think no woman reading the allegations that were all over the place this weekend could do anything other than shudder. It's horrific. And I pay absolute tribute to the women who've come forward also. The journalists that have pursued this, and the editors who have allowed them to do that. The investment that's been put into the place and the huge legal risk that's taken for stories such as these. We all need to do better, and I would just plead anyone who's had experiences like this to come forward and to report them to the police." The BBC reported that Scotland Yard had received no complaints of criminal behavior by Brand. It was reported on Saturday that Brand had been accused of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse over a 7-year period at the height of his fame by several women. The allegations were a result of years-long joint investigation by journalists at the Sunday Times and Times newspaper, as well as Channel 4's Dispatches program. After several requests to respond to the allegations, the media personality denied them. His lawyers initially characterized the way in which the request for comment was made as part of a preconceived strategy aimed at damaging their client, the Sunday Times reported. In a video posted to his YouTube account as publications of the allegations became imminent, Brand claimed his relationship had always been consensual and portrayed the reports as a litany of extremely egregious and aggressive attacks that he denied. I also want to point out some of the social media drama about this, which is that conveniently Russell Brand has become a right-winger, so that all those right-winger people can also support him, like Andrew Tate, and all those people can be like, "Oh, he's a victim like me," even though Andrew Tate was found guilty of sex trafficking. So it doesn't matter if it was a setup. He was found guilty. That means he did. Yes, he was found guilty. He was put in jail. He was in jail for like 3 months or something. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had the. It doesn't matter. Point is, conveniently, when people are about to be accused of sexual assault allegations, what happens? They become white-ring pundits and start talking about stupid shit so that all those right-wingers who have worms in their brain support them too. Just saying. Don't be a sheep. Don't follow somebody just because they have the same politics as you.
This day in history, September 18th, 1819, French physicist Jean-Bernard Léon Foucault, who introduced and helped develop a technique of measuring with extreme accuracy the absolute velocity of light and provided experimental proof that Earth rotates on its axis. Well, he was born. Happy birthday, Jean-Bernard. 1885, Bulgarian nationalists in eastern Rumelia mounted a coup and declared the province unification with Bulgaria, leading to the Serbo-Bulgarian War. In 1895, Booker T. Washington declared the Atlanta Compromise, a classic statement on race relations, in a speech at Atlanta Exposition. Booker T. Washington was kind of he's a divisive person in history. 1898, British forces under Sir Horatio Herbert Kitchener confronted French forces commanded by Jean-Baptiste Marchand at the disputed fort of Fashada in Egyptian Sudan. So those boys were at war in 1898 in Sudan. Sudan's at war today. Nothing changes. 1905, actress Greta Garbo, who is best known for her portrayals of the strong-willed heroines, was born in Stockholm. In 1933, Canadian ice hockey coach Scotty Bowman was born. 1948, local communist commander seized power in Madiun, Indonesia, as part of the rebellion effort against the Sukarno government in the incident known as the Madiun Affair. 1961, UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld died in a plane crash that generated much speculation. A 2017 investigation found that it appears plausible that an external attack or threat may have been a cause of a crash. Well, at least they got to the bottom of it 60 years later. 56 years later. Excuse me. In 1965, Japanese astronomers Aikiya Koru and Seki Tsutomu discovered the comet Aikiya Siki. And some guy just moaned behind me. In 1970, American rock guitarist and singer Jimi Hendrix died in London of a barbiturate overdose at the age of 27. And in 2001, for the second straight day, Typhoon Nari pounded Taiwan with record rainfalls, causing massive flooding and killing 79 people. In 2014, Scottish voters rejected a referendum that would have made Scotland an independent country. So Scotland blew it in 2014, totally blew it. 2020, American lawyer Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who served as the second woman to serve the U.S. Supreme Court, died at the age of 87 on a sad day for democracy, because the very next thing that happened is they pushed through their little pet Supreme Court right before the election. Their Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. Featured event, 1931, Mukden seized by Japanese. In 1931, the so-called Mukden incident, another incident, the Japanese army in Manchuria used the pretext of an explosion along its railway to occupy Mukden and to increase its control within 3 months to all of Manchuria. Feature biography, born on this day, Samuel Johnson. Not Samuel Jackson, but Samuel Johnson, English author, was born on this day on September 18th, 1709 in Lichfield, England. Also born this day, Lance Armstrong, 1971, American cyclist. James Gandolfini, Tony Soprano, was born this day in 1961, so if he was around today, he would be 62. Steven Pinker, Canadian-American psychologist, born in 1954. And Ben Carson, American neurosurgeon and politician, was born in 51. We already covered Greta Garbo. And what day is it today? It's a very short list. Besides National Cheeseburger Day, it is World Bamboo Day. So go out and have some bamboo for dinner. And Air Force birthday is today, September 18th. So United States Air Force was declared a separate entity from the Army in this day. And doesn't say what year. Maybe we'll look it up. The National HIV and AIDS Aging Awareness Day. So they've combined them into three things. Aging and HIV aren't exactly the same thing, but they're combined into the same day.
They're saying that there's people who are alive Just die instantly. Living with HIV.
Well, that's it. Well, salute to Magic Johnson, who we know is still alive and just bought a football team. So that's it for today. Those are all the days.
All right, this has been Allison here again from the Binnenhof, which is the center of Dutch government. Well, right now it's being renovated so that they can actually have the government there, because they've moved the actual government to a different place. But they want to actually have it here, so they're renovating it. And we will see you tomorrow on Tuesday for Good News Tuesday.
And this is Roger signing off from The Hague, where it's windy and we're about to be blown away. For this day, 2023, September 18th, of Before Coffee. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons, and follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.